So this document focuses on combating gender ideology as an ideology in sort of the public square, so which has probably been more the focus of Pope Francis's comments as well, rather than sort of criticizing individuals. And it also talks about the pastoral care, the compassion, and sensitivity with which to treat actual people who are struggling with gender identity issues, and also the need to be honest with them and give them the truth, which we'll get to. But one thing that's not addressed by the document is how this sort of ideological thing manifests itself when people are declaring their gender in some abnormal way, sort of as an ideological statement, perhaps for attention or popularity, or perhaps kind of just as an act of rebellion, which of course this ideology ultimately is. It is a rebellion against sort of submitting to our nature given to us by God. Mm-hmm. It is a kind of a deconstruction of being in that regard. But so what I wanted to ask about is, from your pastoral experience, of course there are people who would be more properly labeled as struggling with gender dysphoria, but then there's a lot of people, and as this stuff becomes more and more popular, this is something Abigail Schreier wrote about in her book, from what I understand, although I haven't read it, is this kind of like social contagion of declarations of different forms of gender identity that are not actually based on they might be based on psychological issues, but not necessarily specifically sexual ones. So I'm wondering, how do you distinguish between someone who is genuinely struggling with a deep-rooted issue and somebody who is kind of making claims that are more disingenuous about themselves, if that makes sense? And how do you respond to them differently?
Well, I will say that with a lot of the young people, for example, those children and their parents are calling me, the kids are in middle school, that is really a matter of a social contagion, rapid onset gender dysphoria, and that there may be among a group of friends at school, one of them reports gender dysphoria, or even just the questioning, maybe I'm a boy, and then suddenly 3 or 4 of the other girls in that the young people call them friend groups. I don't really like that language, but they're among their friends that they all of them suddenly all of them are trans, or they're all got some other issue, like they're saying that they're non-binary or something like that. So I have seen quite a bit of that. I think that's really is what is so prevalent, especially among young people, it is a seductive lie, because what it gives them is a sense that they can escape from the discomfort of adolescence and growing up, whereas they need to grapple with the questions that they're having. They need to grapple with perhaps the discomfort that they have with their body. I mean, I don't know any middle schooler and many high schoolers that are not uncomfortable, at least at times, with their own body, and don't feel at home in their own body. But it doesn't mean that they are somebody else. But that's what it's presented as. But in the gender ideology movement, is it's presented as a cure for adolescence, in a sense. I don't think anybody is really, I don't think that they are saying that, but they're saying this is the answer. Like, you are someone else. And
right.
And that's the thing that I think, I think it's the classic, even archetypal kind of desire to escape from one's life, and like, I've got amnesia, now I've got to figure out who I am and all of that stuff. And lots of old television shows and movies based on that, and novels and things, just that whole notion of what it would be like to escape from oneself. And so I think that of course, young people aren't really articulating it that way, but they really are seeking a way to understand themselves, and the trans movement kind of gives them, I guess, a lens through which they can see themselves and understand themselves. And like, well, this is the reason for my discomfort. This is the reason why I don't feel at home in my body, and why I feel strange and I feel socially awkward and all of those things. And so if this is the answer, then I have to follow through with all of these other things
Hmm.
that are being suggested for me. So that's that answers part of your question, but I mean, I think the pastoral approach. I think first of all, it's it's difficult to distinguish between someone who is really having a sense of uh, how do I say this? I guess what would we would say like a clinical diagnosis of gender dysphoria with, say, a middle schooler or a high schooler that says I'm non-binary or I think I'm a boy. I think
Hmm.
it certainly this gender dysphoria certainly does affect a small number um, of people, much smaller than it really is seeming to be manifest right now in society. And the others, um, there's that confusion, but in the mind and in the heart, it can really take root as a very tenacious lie. So
Hmm.
that's the thing that is very difficult to. Um, that's the thing that's difficult to address from a pastoral standpoint and from also the standpoint of the parents as well, because young people are getting a lot of propaganda about how this is who you are and now you can understand yourself, and there are all these people that will accept you, and if your parents don't accept you, then they don't really love you, and you have every right to disown them or treat them badly, or you know and I've seen the brokenness that this causes in families so much, especially when there's maybe
Hmm.
one parent divorced, the parents are divorced, and one parent is supportive of this new identity, and the other parent is not supportive of it. Um, so it can be very difficult to deal with that. But there's almost always, as the document states, there's almost always these other underlying issues, anxiety and depression, that uh, gender dysphoria also affects um, autistic children at a greater um, percentage than it does children who are
Hmm.
not on the spectrum. But it's because the autism causes that sense of oneself that is disconnected, and
Hmm.
that can be that can be a real cross for kids who are on the spectrum. Um, so I mean, we know that for most young people that experience this or report this, they grow out of it as they mature. And so I think the best pastoral approach is to keep giving them the truth, keep loving, keep encouraging them, keep, give, encourage them to take the pressure off of themselves. That they don't have to have they don't have to set their whole life on a course that is not going to be something that's going to solve any of the issues that they have, but it's going to make things worse,
Hmm.
and can make things a lot worse. But to give themselves
Right.
time to grow, to take the pressure off of themselves in that regard too.